Hello again. So, one thing I didn't mention in the previous video was this little box where they talk about the stigma of introversion, right? How sort of we admire extroverted people and that kind of stuff, and introverted people, well, there's just something wrong with them. They're just too shy. No. All right. Basically, it seems that introverted individuals have enough stimulation within themselves, right? So they don't need to seek this external stimulation. Whereas extroverted individuals, they don't have sort of the stimulation within themselves, so they seek that stimulation in the environment around them and from others. So it's just a different approach in terms of perhaps reaching, the level of excitation that you need, I suppose. But yeah, no, introverts have been very influential throughout history, right? I mean, you have, of course, individuals, they mention like Abraham Lincoln. Well, at that time, in the 1800s in America anyway, when if you're running for president, you didn't really have to be that introverted or that extroverted, right? Because the candidates didn't do a lot themselves at that time period. So anyway, Abraham Lincoln, yeah, he was introverted in many ways, very, very, very introspect, right? He thought a lot, and of course he wrote his own speeches. So a lot of these ideals and things you get from introverts can be major contributions. You can think of some artists who were introverts, who have been very influential over the years. So yeah. So they just point out introversion is not a bad thing. It's actually pretty cool. But anyway. Then they do talk about assessing, well, I already mentioned that, criticisms, right? Evaluating trait theories. Now remember, of course, you should read through the book and know the criticisms of all these approaches if I don't mention them. But basically, remember, psychology is a science, so you're always going to have critics of a particular theory and of particular research. So that's just something you have to tolerate in a science as we get more and more accurate knowledge over time. All right. So they do mention this huge controversy in trait theories, which is they call it in the book the person-situation controversy, right? The person-situation controversy. What use is personality, this idea of personality, if it does not predict individuals' behavior, right? That's one of the issues. So personality theorists, of course, want their measures of these different traits to predict how people are going to behave in the future. But that's the situation controversy, the person-situation controversy. Is their personality really predict their future behavior, or is it the situation that predicts their future behavior? And so you have other individuals, in learning theory and psychology, we skipped that chapter, but it's based on the behaviorists, that early school of thought we mentioned in the prologue. They emphasize environmental stimuli and the behavior of the individual. And when you boil down right to it, in order to better predict a person's behavior, if you know their personality, does that better predict their behavior? Or if you know the situation that they're in, does that better predict their behavior? And of course, the critics argue that it's the situation that is the better predictor of behavior, right? So when you're looking at how a person behaves in a specific situation, personality doesn't necessarily do very good at predicting their behavior, all right? Instead, personality, is even in the definition, we said it's a tendency for people to think and behave in certain ways. So personality will sort of predict over time, more often than not, they'll behave in an extroverted fashion or an introverted fashion, right? But but from one situation to another, personality doesn't predict it very well. It predicts the tendency over time, right? So that's the person situation controversy, and of course the critics say, what use are personality traits if it doesn't really predict behavior in specific situations? So you always have these debates, right, amongst psychological scientists. But they do also say in here that personality traits tend to become more stable over time. So as we get older, you see less change in our personality traits. All right. So when we're younger, you're going to see more change over time. And they got this little figure in there that shows this figure 14.4, right? Children, collegians, well, college-age individuals. The consistency of the scores are lower. In other words, their personality tends to change more when we're young. As we get older, though, and especially by the time, I guess, they have up here 50 to 70 years old, well, that personality stability is at, like 0.7, 70% stable, right? There's still room for change, though, So anyway, yeah, and another kind of, well, I don't know if it's a criticism too, but it's a recognition of what we're talking about here with personality traits too. Personality traits don't try to, right, researchers didn't come up with the personality traits and then do studies to try to confirm those theories or hypotheses, right? Instead, researchers asked a whole bunch of questions, right, in these personality inventories. After that, they did the factor analysis to see how the questions clump together, and then they figure out what the traits are. So another criticism of personality trait approach is that it's descriptive. You're describing personality. You're not predicting it or anything. You're just describing what's already there. And ideally, as scientists, we want to be able to predict, not just describe. So that can be a criticism too. They do mention there's been research over the years, though, where basically you find some correlations between various things and how they might exhibit or indicate our personality traits, such as our music preferences, right? Playlists that we make, that kind of stuff. How we decorate and keep our bedrooms and offices. You don't want to see my office at the university. It's a mess. It has a lot of diverse stuff in it, which is good, in my opinion. So anyway, and then they even go and they got some more recent studies, obviously looking at online spaces. I don't know what that says about our personalities, right? All you people out there that are phishing and making up fake profiles and stuff. What does that say about your personality? That'd be interesting to look into, actually. So someone's doing that. And the way we write, our written communications, which of course, I guess today our written communications are texting, which, oh my God, what that says about our personalities. Anyway, so there's a lot of interesting research done in this area. It can be fascinating. I tend to be a little skeptical of personality theory. Not completely convinced that it's that useful to explain human beings, but it is interesting, right? So that's the end of the trait theories of personality.